What's going on, everybody? It's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and we are going to do a non-gaming topic tonight. Now, as you guys probably already know, every so often I get in one of my moods, and when I get in one of my, let's call them musy moods, I tend to make these, let's call them kind of rambly videos, and I don't do them too often. I get maybe a couple a year, and they're very different from what I usually do. And now we're going to do one of them. We're going to see how this goes. Now, I've been wanting to make a video on this topic for probably maybe about 2 months now, give or take. For the simple reason is I'm a big fan of anime, but what I've been doing lately is I've been having periods of drifting in and out of anime. Now, obviously, as you can tell probably by this video, I'm currently back in anime and back in my phase. But earlier this year, that wasn't the case. I started at one point and I went and watched a little bit and drifted in and out. You know the deal. But just recently, I've gotten back into anime again. Specifically, I continued on where I left off watching Naruto Shippuden, or depending on how you want to pronounce it, Naruto Shippuden, whatever. I've grown up calling it Naruto. That's going to be stuck in my mind forever. Anyway, I've gotten back into watching that again because that's what I was watching primarily earlier this year. I think it was maybe last year I started again, and I had originally watched the majority of original Naruto, and I got about 3/4 of the way through, but I eventually stopped when it was current. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start over. Watched all of the original series, moved on to Shippuden, watched a good bit of that, kind of drifted in and out because, well, there's a lot to watch in there, I'm sure you already know. But I'm about 300 odd episodes deep. I think I'm on about 310, 311. But that's beside the point. That's just catching up. Now, anime. Anime. There's going to be several different topics in this video. We're mostly going to be focused on one of them, but I will obviously mention one or two others as well. The big topic we're really going to highlight and really going to focus is everyone's anime origin story, if you will. Now, I know what that sounds. No, I'm not talking about our own crazy fan fiction that we are anime characters of somehow, although that would be pretty sweet. But no, I'm going to talk about and ask you guys how it started for you, about where, how, when, and why you got into anime. Now, I'm going to leave that for a little bit later in the video because, well, a little bit later, it's probably like 2 minutes away. But I want to just quickly talk about the anime we know and love. I mean, there's all different types of it. There's all different genres, all different subgenres, all different everything. And admittedly, I am kind of not really up to date on the big current anime. I know we've had a big resurgence in the last while. You've had shows like Attack on Titan, which has kind of really opened anime to a bit more of a widespread mainstream audience. And at the same time, now, not because of the content in it, but just because it's really fucking good. But at the same time, you've got other shows that are very popular as well. My Hero Academia is a very big popular one at the moment. Admittedly, I have not watched it. I haven't watched any of it. It's the same with a few years ago when Tokyo Ghoul was the hotness and Death Note was the hotness. I mean, admittedly, I'm not really up on those. I've watched some Attack on Titan. I've watched all of Season 1. I have Season 2, which I haven't even watched yet. And I know Season 3, I think, is possibly in progress right now. I know it's currently either ongoing or coming very, very soon or something to that effect. Anyway, I'm more a little bit old school. I'm two different stages of old school, if you will. I'm old, incredibly old school. I'm Beastie Boys level on one point. Simply because I grew up, now I say I grew up, but I'll get into the specifics much later, with stuff like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Cowboy Bebop. I know that's a little bit later than the first couple I listed as well. Fist of the North Star. There's so many of them out there. Samurai Champloo. There's, again, the list could go on. Bleach, Naruto, whatever. But I'm just going to stop listing them all because at this point I'll just go on for fucking ever. But they're my two different schools of anime, if you will. There's my old school one, which is the kind of late 90s, maybe early 2000s kind of deal. Back just before anime kind of almost dropped off. For those longtime anime viewers out there, you guys already know that in kind of the mid 2000s, there was a very big decline in anime, mainly for various different reasons. Some people cited, say, like work and labor costs. Other people were kind of unhappy with the greed, if you will, of some of the larger studios. They were kind of taking the piss with their pricing. You'd have like a DVD which would have 3 episodes of anime on it, and it would be like €40 or €36 or something. That's fucking expensive. That would be the equivalent of like 2 brand new full movies, day one movies. Like it was pretty extreme, and a lot of people just couldn't hack it, and they just said, fuck it, we're not gonna bother at this point. Now, let's go back. I mean, like I said, 2 different schools of it. There's the Full Metal Alchemist era, the Cowboy Bebop era, that kind of stuff, and the old school stuff, the Ghost in the Shell, the Fist of the North Star, the Akira, the greats, if you will. So they're my 2 kind of that I grew up. Now, I still haven't got to my actual origin story, if you will, but that just gives you a general idea of the history. And believe it or not, I watch strange anime. I've watched many different types of anime. Like, some of the stuff I've just listed now, some of the stuff I've watched recently, some of the stuff I grew up with that I haven't watched in years, or some of the stuff that I am interested in but haven't got around to watching yet. You hear that kind of stuff, and then I'll tell you some of the other kind of stuff that I've watched, and you're just thinking, Q, what is he doing? How are you watching it? Why are you watching it? Well, believe it or not, there was a period of time when I first properly, hugely got into anime. I pretty much watched everything I could get my hands on. And yes, that includes stuff like Love Hina. That includes stuff like Suzuka, which is basically another version of Love Hina, essentially. I forget what they call those. Is it harem anime? It's like harem anime slash slice of life anime. I digress. You get my point. So, I mean, there's so many good ones out there. But what really pushed me to make this video was about 2 days ago. I was feeling a bit weird, as I do, which, as you can probably tell, leading to this video. And what I decided was something small. I was watching my Naruto, my Shippuden, and I decided, you know what, I'm having a bit of a nostalgic night. So I went onto YouTube, and I listened to all 9 of the original Naruto opening music thingies. And then I went and flipped over to the Bleach ones, because I've watched all of Bleach and I've watched all of original Naruto. I grew up with them. I started watching original Naruto during my proper anime phase, when Naruto was like current on maybe like episode 16 or 20, or it was just at the end of the first season, so it would have been like 2025. So yeah, that's how fucking old I am at this point. And I still remember watching the very first episode of Bleach when it was brand new. And these are Japanese release dates I'm talking about. So you see my point. You see how kind of old it makes me feel sometimes, especially when I heard that Bleach was ending, but that's beside the point. So anyway, let's get back to the main topic I want to talk about. Anime origin stories. Now, of course, it's, for some of you out there, it might be very easy to pinpoint your starter point, your origin, if you will, your anime birth, whatever you want to call it. For me, I have to break it down into 3 separate parts, because they're all very different. The timeline is very different and very strange, and it's hard to explain unless you're familiar with technology and society and all that stuff and what was available at the time. Nowadays, it's a whole other story with the interconnectivity of the world, the internet, how fast technology moves, how fast things move from country to country. There was a time where that didn't happen. There was a time where months and years would pass and you'd be lucky to get some of the stuff in that period of time. Some of the stuff you didn't even get at all because of stuff like that. But you'll get my point here anyway. You'll grow to understand it, if you will. Now, I'm going to do these backwards, reverse chronological order. So the first one I'm actually going to talk about is the most recent one. It's the one that properly, truly got me into the whole anime scene, the whole anime thing, and kept me in it forever. But they are going to work backwards. So despite the last one I talk about going to be my youngest version of it, but you'll see. So probably about maybe 15, 16, maybe, yeah, about 15, 16 years ago. So I would have been in my late teens at that point. And what actually happened was it was so very, very hard to find anime here. You could not really find it online, even to download from questionable or non-questionable sources. Shopping online was a whole different story back then. Everyone was afraid of it. It was very, very different from what we know nowadays. And finding stuff, that whole culture and the whole, obviously, anime and geek and nerd culture, gamer culture nowadays is mainstream. That's popular now. That's the hotness. But back then, that wasn't the same. That was a whole other story. And back then, it was very, very, very difficult to find anything to do with anime in a shop. Now, there was one place in Dublin that specifically dealt, it was a comic book store basically, and they dealt in obviously comics, manga, figures, statues, toys, bit of anime here and there. That was one option, but it was so overwhelming to someone kind of only getting into it, if you will, and someone teetering on it, not fully committed, but teetering on it. So that was one thing, and there was one other place, Tower Records. I'm 99% sure that's in America as well, or at least used to be. But we had Tower Records, and they had a very small anime section. Now I say very small, by comparison, they had maybe a dozen shelving units just for one or two sections. But when it came to anime, they'd have maybe 2 or 4. So it was much, much smaller. It was much more niche. But I remember one day, as I was kind of drifting out of anime, simply because it was so hard to find stuff and all that, the big thing happened. I was up in Tower Records with a friend of mine, looking through the anime. There was all these other ones I'd never heard of. There was these ones with strange names to me at the time. But what I saw was 2 DVDs that actually saved anime for me, if you will. These 2 DVDs, which I still have to this day, one of which is signed by someone who was in it. The other I would have actually had signed if I knew I could bring more than one thing to a convention, but anyway. These 2 DVDs were the Cowboy Bebop movie and Dragon Half. Now, of course, everyone knows Cowboy Bebop, that's one of the greats. But Dragon Half is obviously much more niche. It's just a little 2-part OVA series, and it's cheesy as fuck. But that's okay. That's okay, because anime is different. There's so much of it. But when I found those 2, and I bought them because I knew what they were. I'd seen them before, and I thought one of them was, I thought Dragon Half was funny and enjoyable, and Cowboy Bebop kind of blew my mind. It was just so good. But I bought those, and that kind of got me back into it, and it saved it for me, which is really good because I've been in it since. I've watched countless shows. I've bought countless DVDs. I bought countless Blu-rays. There's just so much. I've been to so many conventions because of it. I've got 2 anime tattoos at this point. And yeah, you see my point. So that's what truly saved and got me into it properly. And pretty damn good, pretty damn enjoyable, and pretty happy with it. So let's go on to point number 2, the second point in our origin story. Remember, this one is going chronologically in reverse, but either way, this would still be the second one. This would be the middle one regardless. So it was a little bit younger, a little bit before the one we just talked about. It was probably maybe 3 years earlier, give or take. A couple of years earlier, that's all that matters. Talk about mid-teens. So obviously, internet, like I mentioned before, shopping online, buying stuff even up in Dublin, or in Tower Records, wherever. That was a whole other story. It was very, very different than what we have nowadays. And back before then, you could really only see anime on one specific place, or one specific thing online. Not even online, sorry, on TV. And that was only available on one very specific TV package from one specific company. Now, it's very different nowadays, of course, with TV shows and TV and packages and channels and all being so mainstream and varied now. It's a whole other story. But back then, you could only really see anime on TV on the Sci-Fi Channel. I think America still has the Sci-Fi Channel. Hell, we probably do too now, but I don't watch TV anymore. I just get what I want and I watch that. But here's the cool things. I didn't have that package at the time. A friend of mine did. So what would actually happen? He lives in the next town over. He still does to this day. But actually, now that I think about it, he does still live in the next town over, but on the opposite side now. Anyway, that's not related to the video at all. I just think it's kind of funny. But what he would do is he would record all this stuff onto cassettes, onto VHS during the week, and he would visit every weekend. And he'd bring over a cassette for me and say, this is all the cool stuff that they showed this week, or these are the new episodes of that thing we were watching now and again. And we'd sit down and watch it, or else he'd lend it to me for a night or two and watch it. And yeah, that was really the only thing I could do when it came to it, when it came to anime. And it still had me, that was what got me to the teetering point that I mentioned a little bit later, because, you know, you can only go on like that for so long. They only show so many shows for so long and whatnot. And they kind of started doing repeats and all. They only had licenses to a handful of shows. So once they did complete, or once they just get fed up with them or run out of shows or something, they just start running reruns. Get maybe one new, I won't even say new series, but like maybe one new film or one new OVA or whatever, like every couple of months. It couldn't last forever, and luckily, eventually, we've already covered what actually happened. But that brings me back to the final point, or the original point, if you will. And you can judge for yourself which one of these counts as my true origin story. I would probably say it's this one we're about to go into now, which is the earliest one, the youngest one of all of them. So this one was in the 90s. It was that old. I believe it was the 90s. It might have been the very, very early 2000s, but I'm almost certain it was in the mid to late 90s. So, for those of you out there who are living in Europe, and maybe back then in the 90s, you were a fan of WWF. That's right, before it was WWE, you were in the WWF. You might remember that the pay-per-views, you know, the Royal Rumble, King of the Ring, SummerSlam, WrestleMania, whatever they did, were exclusive to a pay-per-view channel called Sky Sports. Just a pay-per-view deal over here. But nowadays it's very different, like that doesn't matter. So back then, you would need not only a very specific TV package with the box office version of the sports channels, and then pay extra on top of it just to see them. That was a pretty fucking... yeah, that was kind of highway robbery. And not many people had that back here in the day, back then in the 90s. Now, eventually a deal was struck with a different broadcaster, a non-Sky broadcaster. And there was a channel called Channel 4. It's based in the UK, but it obviously operates here in Ireland as well. And what they would do is there was a contract or whatever, an agreement to show, I believe it was 4 pay-per-views a year. Now, Channel 4 is a free-to-view TV, maybe not free, but it's included in the basic package of everything. It's not the free one, but no matter where you would go for a basic package, it would include that. And they would show them on there. So for essentially, for all intents and purposes, it was a standard channel that everyone had. And you didn't have to pay a pay-per-view fee on top of it just to watch the whatever it was, the pay-per-view. Now, I want to say it was King of the Ring. I can't fully commit to that. I want to say it was King of the Ring. I know what you might be thinking. It's like, Q, what does this have to do with anime and your origin story? I'm about to get to that. So because of the time difference, and because these were live, I believe they were, they're usually 5, maybe 6 hours ahead. We're usually 5 or 6 hours ahead, depending on what part of America they would actually be taking place in. So usually for us, they would be anywhere between 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning before they actually started. And remember, I was a kid. I was probably 10, 11, 12 years old at this point. So back then, to me, staying up that late was very, very difficult. Now, I was actually on holiday, believe it or not. That's right, myself and my mother went away. We were on holiday. She knew I wanted to stay up and watch wrestling. So I was like, okay, you know what? You can stay up and watch wrestling. Sleep on the couch. We were whatever apartment or whatever place we were staying. She's like, you can sleep on the couch bed instead of your regular bed. And you can just watch the anime in there. Or the WWF in there. And okay, I was like, okay, that's cool. So I was staying up. I was happy as a pig in shit. It was great. And I was staying up late, and what they would do is they would have a very specific block of time on Channel 4 back in the day. It was kind of between like midnight and maybe 2 a.m. or something like that. In around those kind of hours, the late night hours. And what they would do is they would show very different stuff. Now, I wasn't aware, I knew they would show very different stuff and very weird stuff and all, but I didn't know what it would be. And of course, one of those things happened to be anime. The funny thing about it is they showed the anime after the wrestling at the time, I believe it was. It could have been before, it could have been after. It's been like 20 years. Give me a break. But I remember staying up late. Actually, you know what? I'm 99% sure it was before it. But anyway, I'm beating a dead horse here. So I remember staying up and watching Fist of the North Star. Fist of the North Star just happened to be on before the pay-per-view. And I remember seeing it and watching it. I was like, holy shit, this is badass. Cartoons can be like this. That's right, I was 12. I thought anime was just a cartoon. Honestly, that's changed. But anyway, I remember seeing it. A Fist of the North Star. It blew my mind. I completely forgot about the name of it until several years later. Obviously, I now know it's Fist of the North Star. But yeah, I did find out much later what it was. And I was like, okay, that's it. And that was my first proper introduction to anime. Little side note on there too. Right at the end of the Fist of the North Star as it was playing, and no, not the terrible live action film, but the actual like anime. So right at the end of it, like I think it might have been like just 2 minutes before the end, or possibly even during the credits, I fell asleep and actually missed the wrestling, which I thought was kind of funny. But that's kind of my original, that's right, triple original, because we got 3 points, introduction and origin to anime. A little fun fact aside, a couple of years later, I'd say maybe 5, 6, 7 years later, you know, you're online, you're talking to people about anime or whatnot, and I actually found a guy who used to live in Scotland, and he's about my age at the time as well. Obviously he's still my age now, because yeah, whatever, I'm rambly, remember. But it's funny that we were originally talking about how, you know, like anime we love and remember watching our earliest animes and stuff. And funny enough, his was actually the same. He mentioned that to me. I was like, holy shit, it's exactly the same as me. That is literally the same day, the same night, the same channel, the same day. That's me. And it was just so cool. It was pretty funky. So of course, all of that combined together, all three of them, has basically a lifelong obsession at this point. Like I said, I'm not always 100% into anime. I'm not always up on the current stuff. I'll watch some good stuff, hardcore, for a couple of months, couple of weeks, whatever it is, and then I'll kind of drift out of it. Maybe I won't watch anime for 2 or 3 months, and then I'll go back into it. I'll buy a new Blu-ray, I'll want to watch that. I'll buy a new show, I'll want to watch that. I'll buy an old show, I'll want to watch that. Or I'll watch something I already owned and I never got around to, or maybe want to get around to rewatching. Hell, just a couple of months ago, Manga UK launched Ghost in the Shell standalone complex on Blu-ray. Show is a fucking masterpiece. I've been begging for that on Blu-ray for years, and now it's finally out. You damn right I picked that shit up and went to town on it as soon as it finally came out. I've seen it several times, but it's just so good, and the fact that they did it, I would still commit to that. Anyway, that has been this rambly expedition down memory lane when it comes to anime, our love for it, and our little origin story of anime. Now, before someone is going to ask me in the comment section below, Q, what is your favorite anime? Well, there's 2 or 3 answers to that, simply because, 1, sometimes I can't choose. Sometimes it's just so close and so hard to pick. 2, I have to break it into separate categories, because I have a best anime film and best anime TV series, or best anime series. So when it comes to best anime film, they kind of have a triple threat going on. It's like 33% each, and no one has any clear specific winner. Those, of course, are the stereotypes, if you will. Akira, I have Ghost in the Shell, and I have Cowboy Bebop, the movie. So all 3 of them goes back and forth. You know, it's so hard to pick, so hard to choose. And it's the same with the TV shows. It's like, what's your favorite anime show? Well, it's kind of a 50-50. You ask me on any day, it could be one. You ask me on any other day, it could be the other. So that's why I call it a 50-50 tie between Ghost in the Shell standalone complex and Cowboy Bebop. Obviously, there's other amazing ones up there too, like say Samurai Champloo and things like that, but you see my point. It's just so close so much of the time. So let me know in the comment section below not only your anime story, your anime origin, but let me know everything you love about it, everything you do love about it, everything you don't love about it, your favorite shows, your favorite movies, your favorite whatever, your favorite actors, your favorite voice actors, if you watch subs or dubs, if you hate subs, if you hate dubs, or if you love or hate both or a mixture of whatever it is. Let me know all that good stuff in the comment section below. Thank you so much for listening to this usual extended weird rambly video I do. Remember to hit the appropriate button to let me know how I did on the video, as well as the subscribe button, and even ring that little notification bell. Granted, getting a notification from YouTube in current year is a whole other story, but at least you can say you tried, am I right? As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the rest of the videos in my channel.